Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the It's Just Dinner podcast. I'm your host, Tom Robinson, and sitting across from me, like always, my co-host, Bob Walz.
Great to be here, Tom, as always.
It's good to see
Looking
you.
forward to our discussion today. It's good to see you, too. You're
know,
a good-looking man. You don't know this now that we're on TV, but this is a good-looking man right here.
Thank you so much. Wow. You should tell my wife that.
No, she knows that. I know she tells me that. That's where I'm getting this. I'm quoting her.
So, hey, I'm really excited today. We have a great guest.
We've got a
with us
guest
today.
in the house. This
And,
is a kind of a new thing for the It's Just Dinner podcast. We're broadening out. We're bringing in big shots.
This is
now.
a famous author.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, look.
Welcome.
I wasn't too intimidated to come on because it's just podcast.
It's just
a
podcast.
podcast.
That's
Just a
all it
podcast.
is. It's
Just
just
podcast.
anything.
Well, this is welcome, Zack Oates. If
Yes,
you will.
Zach. Glad to have you.
Zach is a dating expert.
Also a good-looking man.
He is, and
Probably better looking than Tom.
He has a book. Maybe you should show the book.
This is
there
the book right here.
so
Where's
everybody-
which one of these cameras is going to see
Everybody
this
at home
book?
can see that.
You seeing that book
It's called
right there?
Dating Never Works Until It Does. 100 Lessons from 1,000 Dates.
Ooh,
Did you go on 1,000
Ooh.
dates?
No, I actually went on like 1,200.
1,200
really?
dates.
Yeah.
So you over-promised, under-delivered, or over-delivered and under-promised here, which is
They just, the publisher was like, 1,000 sounds better.
it does, you know.
I love the write-up on this book, and I'll just read it to you. It says, tired of mixed messages, confusing signals, and of playing the dating game, a comical guide that will keep you happy and laughing. Perfect for audiences in dating situations of all kinds. These encouraging steps will help you find your celestial mate.
Oh, there we go.
Wow.
Now that might be an overpromise.
Yeah,
Have you-
I didn't
I was
write
going to say,
that.
did you write that?
Woo.
Well, it's really good to have you here, and I've known Zach for a long time, and I was really excited to have you come on our podcast because I want to know about you, and I want to know about this book. So why don't you tell us how this book was born?
So it was born out of compassion for my friends.
Ah,
Not because they needed advice, but because I was so sick of just sitting them down and making them hear out my theories. So what I started to do was I started to write them down, and I was like, I'm gonna write a blog about dating, because then I don't have to hey, okay, Connor, I got this theory about dating, and have him hear about my most recent harebrained dating idea. So anyway, I started just a blog post so that they didn't have to listen to me, and then it just kind of picked up steam, and I started writing. We've written I've written over 300 articles about dating.
Wow.
And then after a while, I got contacted by a book publisher saying, "Hey, do you want to write a book?" And I was like, "Oh, sure. All the posts are already there." And so what I didn't know is that the idea of taking these disparate blog posts that I've written over the course of a few years and compiling it into a cohesive book with, a storyline with something that makes sense,
Right.
Was a lot harder than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, and then once you actually do that and compile it all together, then you're like, okay, now I'm done. It's like, well, no, now the editing process begins. And then once you get the book edited, you're like, oh, well, now I'm done. We're like, well, no, now the marketing aspect begins.
Right.
And so anyway, it was a lot more work than I thought it would be. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad it's out there. And I don't think there's going to be a sequel unless it's Marriage Never
Well,
Works.
you may not. Yeah, you may not need a sequel. So
so let's get this part out of the way off the top. Where could people find the book?
Amazon.
Amazon's buy it on Amazon.
Easiest place to find it. Go to Amazon. Just type in "Dating Never Works Until It Does," and it'll pop up for you.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to mention that again later at the end, but we're going to mention it now. Because now we're going to explain to them why they should get your book.
Okay.
Because we're shameless here, and it's just dinner. We're
This
shameless
is
promoters of
self-promoter.
our guests.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
Especially when they tie in so well with our initiative here of It's Just Dinner. It means it's just dating. It's just conversations. So when did you go on 1,200 dates? From when to when? I mean, are we counting from when you were 16 on, or?
In high school, I didn't date. I grew up in Jersey, and so the concept of dating just didn't exist there. Like this idea of asking someone out. I mean, here's how prom went for me. I'm at my locker, and Claire Min, who has just happened to have the locker next to me because M-O right next to each other, and she goes, "Hey, who are you going to prom with?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." She goes, "All right, come with me." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And that was it. And I went to her house and I picked her up. I met her mother. I met her boyfriend. I met her dad. And we went to prom together.
And now they're married and have 5 kids.
Yeah. Well,
no.
No, much later. So anyway, it wasn't really a thing. And then I went to BYU and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I could date, like I could go out with people. And so it was, I had no shame of asking people out because it was like,
that's wonderful.
Why not? What do you have to lose? Like, what are they going to do? Say no? And turns out, yes, actually.
I'll say no a lot.
Yeah. I tell people about a third of the girls that I asked out either said no or canceled. And a couple even just didn't show.
Wow.
Ghosted you.
So out of 1,000, we're talking like 300 girls who dissed you.
Yes.
Wow.
And you know what? Like it's okay.
It's just part of the game. That's
and
you learn so much from that.
Oh yeah. And that's one of the reasons why the title of the book was so important to me, because honestly, that is the entire concept of the book is basically keep hope. Like don't lose hope, because dating isn't supposed to work until it does. Right? And every single date ends in a failure, and then one time it won't.
That's right. We talk about that a lot.
And that's okay. And people feel like, oh, it's me. And now, especially towards the end of my dating career, which I call it a career because even though I paid the money and got very little benefits, it was, Tinder was a thing. And so getting onto Tinder, I remember my girlfriend came over. Things weren't going too well. We popped a bag of we made some jalapeno popcorn, and we talked about it. And we decided to break up. So she left my house at 10 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, I had a girl coming over, and we went and got ice cream together.
Wow!
At 11 o'clock, right?
Wow.
Like
you just get right back on that horse.
It's that easy. Yeah. It's that easy, everyone.
And honestly, Tom, that's what's scary. A lot of the people that I talk to. My fear was all of my friends. I had a lot of fun in dating, but I saw a lot of my friends come back into the dating scene. They got married, living the dream, and it was all great, and everything seemed great, and every post was about like, oh, I love my wife, I love my husband, and 6 months later they're back in the single scene, divorced. And I had so many friends that did that I was so afraid of dating. But the other thing is that you get afraid of marriage, afraid of commitment, because you don't want to end up like that, right? But at the end of the day, it's like that's not the end of the world. It's okay. Like people go through hard things and they come out better because of it. So that fear was a big reason why I stayed single. The other fear was FOMO, right? I don't want to get exclusive with this person because there might be someone better.
The grass is always greener.
The bigger, better deal.
Yeah.
And here's the truth of it. And when I realized this truth, it changed everything. There is always someone better. Always. And at first you hear that and you're like, well, wait, what? It's like, it's not about finding the best person. It's about finding someone that you're a great match and you're committed to changing together. Because, you will never stay married to the same person. You are going to change. They are going to change. And so it's about how do you two as a couple change together, and realizing that at any moment, yes, there's someone better, but you're making this every day. You commit yourself to make it the best relationship.
You're happy where you are.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just talking about that, where you find someone and you learn to love that person, and that person all of a sudden becomes the greatest person in the world, the best person in the world,
the best person for you,
because they are living their life with you. And you're right, there always are going to be better people along the way, but you're happy where you are, and you're moving forward where you are, and it's a good match.
So let me. Mind if I tell a story about the temple? So I was dating my wife, and we dated for a very brief period of time. Like, when I say very brief, like I met her June 19th at about 10 a.m. in Moab on a hike. By 2 p.m. we're kissing in her tent, and 2 months later we're engaged. Like very, very quick.
That is pretty quick.
Yes. And and by the way, for 5 weeks of that, she was in Thailand. So we didn't even just Skyped each other and stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, when I was thinking about, okay, this is like a crazy idea, but should I propose to her? I decided to go to the temple and pray about it. And so I'm in the temple, and I walk in, and sitting right in front of me, there is this girl who was just gorgeous. I mean, like unreal beautiful. And she looked at me and she smiled, and I about melted into my seat. And it was like, this is my answer. Like, I'm supposed to be with someone else. And and it's this. And years from now, we're going to be telling the story to our grandkids about how I was almost engaged and I met your grandma in the temple. And it was it
was love at first sight.
We just connected. Anyway, so after the session, I'm sitting down and waiting for her to come through. And I'm going to go up and get her number, and here it is.
Right.
So I sit down, and the room was very, very open, with the exception of like one thin vase in the middle of the room, and there were tons of chairs that were all open, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and I don't see her, and so I'm like, well, maybe let me go get changed real quick, because maybe she's like left already. So when I stand up to leave, what I realized was she had been sitting there the whole time, but she was sitting exactly opposite this thin vase. Mm-hmm. So it just so happened that had I been sitting 6 inches one way or 6 inches the other, I would have seen her. But because of where I was sitting, where the vase placement was, I couldn't see her. And so it was, and all of a sudden it hit me. That fact that there will always be someone that you may have a connection with, someone that you think is attractive, but it's a matter of putting that out of your mind and realizing that you've made your choice, and that isn't your choice, and that based on where you're at in life and what your mindset is, that will determine, are you going to be the best person for your person? Are they going to be the best person for you? It's not about, oh man, I want to wait for someone else, because there's always going to be that someone, but it's about how do you put that possibility out of your view.
Right.
And I went home, and I was like, I'm going to propose to her. And I did, and it's been awesome.
The best thing ever.
So kind of the concept of be satisfied with what you have rather than always looking at what you don't have. And we do that a lot in life anyway, rather than appreciating what's right in front of us that we do see. We're always not satisfied because we know what we don't have. And sometimes that weighs on us more heavily than appreciating what we do have.
Yeah, and so the concept is FOMO, right? Like that fear of missing out. Thomas S. Monson, he said, choose your love and love your choice.
Yeah.
That's good.
I like that.
He said,
now, who's that?
He sounds like he was a prophet.
Thomas Monson. Can I write that down? I'll Google him.
So I'd like to hear a little bit about what's in the book, and maybe what you would tell these young people that are listening to this podcast who maybe aren't dating as much as they should be, or they're falling into this BYU kind of trap where they're hunting for a wife. Mm-hmm. What would you tell them to kind of relax their minds and get them out dating and talking to each other? Our whole thing is just go out to dinner. Just sit across from someone and talk. It's way better than sitting home alone.
Absolutely. And I think that's so there's a piece of advice in my book. It's called the 3-point rule. And this is one that's kind of outlived and kind of grown a life of its own. But the concept is, I was always concerned that I was being too forward. And a lot of reason why guys don't ask girls out, why girls don't ask guys out, is because they're worried about bugging the other person. Right?
Right.
I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation, so I'm not going to ask you out, so that way you don't have to say no. Because why would you want to go out with me, right? So you start off with this defeatist mindset. So the 3-point rule really helped me to know when to stop. So the concept is, as you reach out to someone, each method of communication has a certain point value to it. So if I call someone, that's 1 point. If I call them and leave a voice message, that's 2 points, because it's all around how easy is it for them to see that you've reached out to them. If I go and buy some brownies and go leave it on their doorstep with a note, that's 3 points. Now, as you do these things to a person, they get the points. As they do the things back to you, those points are reduced. So the objective is to stay at 0. Now, when you get to 3 points, you stop.
Bail. That's time to
Done.
jump.
3 points, you're
out.
Exactly. And so that 3-point rule is one that helped someone like me not realize that I'm not bugging people. Because if I call and leave a message and then I call again and you don't call me back, that's called a hint.
Yes.
Take it.
Yeah. Well, that's what we call ghosting, that's a hint.
Take the hint.
Yeah.
Move on.
Exactly. And if and so it's really important to realize that you need to stop when they're giving you the signs, not when you want to stop. That's typically guys are asking girls out. For a girl to ask a guy out, all the time I'll have girls that'll come and as we're talking about dating, as I'm doing FSY and dating firesides, they're like, well, I don't want to ask guys out because it seems too forward.
All right.
You don't have to seem too forward. What you have to do is you got to get them to ask you out. And the way that you do that is you touch their elbow, you laugh at their jokes, you make eye contact, and then you say, have you ever heard of insert place? I heard it was so good. We should totally go there sometime.
It's just dinner.
Yep. And by the way, just so no one's lying, every place in the entire world is good. So now you're not lying when you said you heard it was good, okay? Because I just told you it's good. And we should totally go there sometime. Now, if the guy doesn't ask you out after that, either one, he's not interested, in which case that's okay, or 2, he's too dumb to realize that you're putting out the vibes, in which case you don't want to pass the stupid genes on to your kids. So either way, it's a win for you. So that's what I would say to the guys. That's what I would say to the girls. And then, can I give a piece of advice that would kind of like defeat the purpose of the whole book?
Sure. So
in the very last, and Bob, if you want to read the title to the very last chapter of the book. So it's 100 short chapters. You could read each one in a couple of minutes. But the very last chapter of the book has an interesting title.
The parting conclusion?
Oh no, the one right
before that.
Right before the parting conclusion. Let's see if is it there?
Okay. Love is the goal.
Oh, no, it should be. Maybe that one was chapter 99. The last chapter is titled, "If you only read one piece of advice, read this." And here's the piece of advice. Don't take other people's advice in dating. You do what the best version of you would do. Because if you read my book and you do all 99 pieces of advice, guess what?
You're gonna fail.
They're dating me. They're not dating you. So with any dating advice, take it with a grain of you, right? Yeah. Like, what would the best version of you do? Right. And that's what I found is like the most comforting. You don't have to think about, I know you love baseball. When you're sitting there and you're at second base and batter's up, the thing you're thinking is, if the ball comes to me, what do I do, right? Because you don't want to think about it when the ball gets hit to you. You think about it before the ball. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so people start overthinking things and like, okay, what do I do in this situation, that situation? Just do what the best version of you would do.
Just relax.
And I always say that every person and every situation is different. So have fun doing different things every time. Even the ones that fail, have fun at failing at those.
Now, let me ask you a couple of specific things about the book. And you have a section in there on making a list. Mm-hmm. And so, my advice for dating is don't make a list. But as I read through this, the list that you're advising to make is much different than a lot of the lists that I know. A lot of times, men make a list based on looks and, things like that. And hair color and eye color and things like that. And women make lists on how much money they have and what car they drive. But your advice on making a list is much different than that.
Yeah, it's really about, when I made my list, what I did was I looked at all the people that I most respected in my life. And I wrote the things that I really respected about them. And I looked for common attributes. And then I whittled that list down to 5. And it was like, let me be this list. right? I remember my wife told me that they used to do that in young women's. That they'd write the list and they'd be like, okay, now are you all those things, you know? But it's really about having this idea of what are the principles that you're going after? What are the things, like for me, I was looking for a beautiful, positive leader who put God first and was kind. Those were like my 5 things. And it was like if they didn't meet one of those things, then deal breaker, right? But if they met all 5 of those things, then I asked them out and I pursued it. And with my wife, it was like she met all 5 of those things, and yeah, it wasn't what either of us had expected that we would date. In fact, we had over 100 mutual friends, and when they found out we were dating, they were like, "Wait,
really?
1, you two don't know each other. 2, you two are dating?" Like, they would have never put us together.
Now, of those 5 things, which would you say is the most important?
For me, it was kindness. And if you, and that's something that I've realized too in my marriage, is that if you marry someone who is kind, so many other things fall into place.
Oh yeah.
But someone who is mean, someone who treats others, you know, in a non-Christ-like way, someone who is rude, it's like, it doesn't matter how beautiful they are. That is a very ugly attribute.
Right.
And
it's funny because we had a young woman on the show a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And she said she looked for 2 things, and they're both on your list. She said, I look for someone who's kind, and I look for someone who's righteous. And she goes, those are the 2 things on my list. And it's funny because those 2 things are on your list as well.
Yeah, and I think that it's so, and I didn't that kindness, that wasn't something that I came up with, but I asked my grandfather, who, you know, my grandmother was an incredible woman. They had a great marriage. My daughter is actually named after my grandma. And when I asked my granddad, why was your marriage so good? And she said, because your grandma was kind. And that flipped everything, because everyone that I had really appreciated, everyone that I had almost proposed to, everyone that I had proposed to, because my wife was the 3rd proposal I made.
That's a different podcast.
They were all kind. And I think that's something that we need to really look at for ourselves, of how do we really treat other people? And
right.
do we really believe that everyone's important?
I think it's important for everyone to learn that.
Yeah.
Now, another thing from your book that I found very interesting that you addressed, because I hear this from students and from my own children and other people that I talk to, and that is something called the friend zone.
Oh, boy.
And so you have a section in this where you talk about the steps, the principles to get out of the friend zone. And so I think all of our listeners right now are, you know, aren't you interested to find out?
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
let us know the secret here. Come on, give it up.
So first of all, the friend zone, that is like the death zone. That is when you go on a date and, well, let me tell you how I knew I was in the friend zone one time. I went to go pick up this girl. I thought it was our 3rd date. And I knocked on her door, and she opened the door, and she was in like yoga pants and a tank top. And I'm in collared shirt, nice jeans, dress shoes. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? And she goes, oh, well, like, did you want to go out? And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, that's what I was like, let's go out on a date to get some dinner. And so she's like, oh, okay, well, come here. Let me like throw something on. She opens up her closet, reaches into a pile of clothes, pulls out something from the middle, wasn't even looking, pulled something out, smelled it, and then gave like a weird face and was like, put it on. And then I was like, okay. And then she goes, and this is what did it for me. This was the nail in the coffin. She goes to walk out the door, and she puts on Crocs. Crocs. We weren't gardening. We weren't going to shower in some 3rd world country. Like, we're going on a date, and she puts on Crocs, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And
I'm in the friend zone.
She was like, what? I was like, I am your straight gay best friend, aren't I? She goes, well, yeah. And I was like, okay. So I think a lot of times the fact is, you were either in 10 years going to be married to that person or not talking to them. don't pretend like you're going to be friends. Okay,
friends for life. It doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist, and the chances of it happening are very, very slim. So just assume there are no friends. Okay, you are not going to be friends with somebody that at one point you dated or were attracted to. So my concept, the notion is, take that leap, ask them out on a date, stop talking about their relationships, and when you do that, and it's a lot better to lose a friend in the short run and to realize that you that it was never a chance there in the long run.
The young women tell me that all the time, that they get tired of just hanging out, just being asked to come over and hang out. And I think you're right. Just ask them out.
Yeah. But
and
I
if
think
they say yes, do it. If not, don't get stuck in the friend zone.
But I think what extension you're saying on that is that a way to get yourself in the friend zone is listen to them talk about their past relationships and give them advice on dating.
Oh my gosh. And that's sometimes literally someone would be talking to me and they'd say, "Oh, I went out with this guy last week." And I'd be like, hold on. I just want to be very clear. Are you telling me this as someone that you're interested in, or are you telling me this as someone that is your friend? And she goes, "Oh, we're just such good friends." And I'm like, all right, well, we don't have to go.
Check, please.
Check, please. Can we get this to go? Because I got to hop on Tinder to get another date.
Somebody who's actually interested in me.
Yes. And that's the thing is, I feel like there's such a desire to have that connection. And so people will have that connection with people that they're not interested in, not realizing that they're putting on the other person. They're leading them on, and that's not fair.
No, it's not. Lauren, you ever friend zone someone?
Yeah.
Well, you
ever been in the friend zone with someone?
Oh, all the time.
All the time?
All the time.
And that's the thing.
I'm a really good friend.
People, it is so easy to, it's a lot easier to feel like you're in the friend zone than to put someone in the friend zone. Because a lot of times we are unintentionally friend zoning a lot of people. I guarantee you there's guys that are interested in you right now, and you're like, "Oh, he is such a good friend." He's not. He's not a good friend. He's interested in you. But girls, I feel like, are a lot more emotionally sympathetic, and they're like, "No, I don't want to ask. I don't want to like. He's just a good friend. He's just a good friend." He's not. I'm sorry.
He doesn't want to be your friend.
Isn't going to happen.
No.
Now, we in our podcast here, we kind of talk about the cause of this dysfunction that we have especially in we're finding it's not just our culture, but many cultures. And that is, we've gotten away from dating being the purpose of dating is to make friends.
Yeah.
And instead, we've shifted it over. The purpose of dating is finding a wife. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't sound on the surface like it's that big, but it's hugely big. And so every time you ask someone out, if you look at them and say, well, this could be my potential forever, then you're handicapping yourself to start with. So we've kind of identified this, but I'd like to hear your take on it. And the sense that I get is you had no problem dating. And so you were fine on dating, but your dysfunctional roommates caused you to reflect on these things. How did your roommates and so many others become dysfunctional?
By putting too much pressure on things that didn't need pressure, right? It was like, because when we went out and you told me it's just dinner, it was kind of funny because before you even said that, I was like, I tell people just ask them out to frozen yogurt. It's just frozen yogurt. Yes. And then you're like, that's the whole concept. That's the whole it's
right.
Just dinner.
Our whole last podcast was about that.
Yeah. And it's all about, a first date is just a first date. And by the way, please make it just a first date.
Oh, yes.
And by just a first date, I mean like, it's okay to take someone out for frozen yogurt.
1 hour.
Yeah, 1 hour, door to door. Like, and it's okay to take someone out just for ice cream or to go to lunch. Like, do these things that are not a big deal. Now, each step along the way, treat it the same. When you like someone and you ask them out on a second date, and by the way, use the word date. Be like, hey,
the second time, absolutely.
Yeah, hey, do you want to go on a date next Friday night?
Right.
And if you're taking them on a date, you better feed them. Okay. And if you're not feeding them, you better let them know that they're not going to get fed, because there is nothing worse than going out on a date and thinking that you're going to get a meal, you don't
And
eat.
not getting one.
And not getting one. And it's like 11 o'clock at night, and you're like, this cheapo didn't even bother to get me a Big
Is that
Mac.
true? Is that true, Lauren?
Yeah. Yeah.
He'd better buy you a meal.
Food is great in any sense.
Right?
Yes.
But it's the worst when you're expecting
Yes.
it, and it
If
doesn't
you're
happen.
expecting it, then it, like, sometimes for me, I know, like, I've gone on a date expecting to, like, eat, and then we don't, and it's a lot of times it ends up being longer than just an hour. And so then I'm like,
Right?
well, I gotta eat. Like, what am I gonna do?
Like,
how do I get out of this?
Are we
Like,
expecting women to like stuff their purses with protein bars and take bathroom breaks just in case?
Just in case, this might not be a bad idea.
Yeah.
You know, Built Bar, we could get them as a sponsor
Yeah,
of this
there you
show.
go,
And
right?
If they keep a Built Bar in your purse, ladies,
It's just a Built Bar.
it's just Built Bar. That's not a bad idea. If any of you are out there have connections with Built Bar, we'd like to talk with them.
But it really is like even and I'm going to say this is a little bit controversial, but I'm going to say it's just a proposal. Okay?
That is controversial.
Oh.
It is. It's just a proposal. Like, for example, when I proposed to my wife, I was fully ready to back out because I was like, look, I'm not committing to marry her. I'm committing to being engaged to her. And how does our relationship change and evolve as we're engaged? And so people get so scared about getting engaged, like that's not marriage. Okay?
That's true.
And so it's okay. And while the pressure mounts the closer you get to the date, it's okay. Like it's until you get married, it's not marriage. And marriage is the big step.
Right.
And people put
So everything else is not the big step. It's just learning as you go.
it's seeing how do you feel in this next phase.
Right.
How do you feel on a first date? And by the way, what should a guy do on a first date? Because who asks out on the second date typically? Is it the guy or the girl?
To ask out on the second date? Usually the guy.
Usually the guy. So a couple things, gentlemen. Number one, do not ask out someone for a second date at the end of a first date. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because when you're asked, it's like putting the pressure on them. Give them some space. Let them breathe. You know, when you take a steak off the grill, you let it sit, right? And that's what you got to do to a first date. The other thing you got to do is you got to shut up. A first date is the guy is supposed to get to know the girl. Why? Because that's how they're going to know, do they want to ask him out on a second date? The problem is guys will just talk. And as you can tell, I had no problem with that. And so I had to really rein that in. But on the first date, have great questions, get to know them, and then decide if they want to go out on a second date. And guess what? Who loves talking about themselves? Everyone, right?
Yep.
And so she's going to have a much better time if you shut up, right? So I say guys should talk 20% of the time on a first date, and then it goes to about 50-50 on the second date.
How many times have we said that?
Yeah.
It is painful when you see people on these dates, and you can tell the guy's just talking, and the girl is just nodding her head. And then at the end, he's like, oh, I had a great time. Want to go out? And she's like, you didn't even know me. Why would you want to go out?
So maybe I can go out and hear more about you? Yeah. Oh,
You're so
let's
fascinated.
do
Please
that.
tell
Let's
me
not
more.
eat. Let's just go somewhere and talk about you.
Yes.
Now, one of the things, I don't know if you addressed this in the book or not, but what's your idea of women asking men out? Now, I know you have a section in here on how men ask a girl out. How do you feel about, we talk a lot about this, that we kind of have this taboo thing in our religion and our culture about girls being too forward if they ask a man out on a date.
So personally, I got to say, I thought it was, I always felt a little uncomfortable when a girl asked me out. I would always be looking for the signs, like, like I said, touch my elbow, laugh, tell me we should go somewhere, and then let me ask you out. And the reason why is because now there are some guys that are super shy, and you might need to, if you're
Prime
into
the
shy
pump a
guys,
little?
yeah, then go prime the pump and tell them, hey, there's a movie going on. You want to come with me?
You should ask me to go.
Yeah. But I remember one time someone gave me a coupon book, and it was a coupon for one date with her, and I was like, I don't really want to go out with her. And then she asked me every single week when I was going to redeem that coupon, and I'm like, Okay, all right, let's do it. So I finally redeemed the coupon. So she's like, I got the whole thing planned, and I was like, okay, cool. So we go to a rock climbing gym, and I noticed that she didn't bring her purse with her, and I was like, okay, but it's rock climbing gym. I don't know, maybe a credit card or something. We go to the front, and he's like, okay, that's gonna be $40, and she looks at me. And I slowly pull out my credit card, and he gladly swipes it. And she's like, "Oh, thank you." And I'm like, "Oh God." And then so I'm like, "All right, well, let's go home." And she's like, "Okay, now we have dinner." So we go to a quite expensive restaurant, like not like Ruth's Chris or anything, but it was like $25 a plate, and we sit down and we order, and I see the check coming, so I stand up to go to the restroom, right? I come back, and the check is there in front of me, and I slowly pull out my card, and I put it down. She's like, "Oh, thank you." I spent $100 on a date
that she asked you
She asked me on. So anyway, I would just say, if you think the guy's really shy, ask him out, but put the signs out there, and
You do have a chapter in your book about how to get a guy to ask you out.
Yes.
Right? So you've taken the opposite side of that, of saying rather than asking them out, then there are techniques that you can use to convince them that you want to go out with them, that they will ask you out.
Yeah.
And then that way it's a more normal and natural way in what you've observed.
And on Tinder, by the way, or on Tinder's gotten a little bit of a bad rap nowadays. But Mutual or these other good dating apps, it's like, say, hey, want to go out we should grab some frozen yogurt. Like something like that is totally normal because they've swiped, you've swiped. There's already this presupposition of attraction. And so, great, let's go to frozen yogurt. Something like that, totally fine. If you go up to someone that you go to church with or like your neighbor and just knock on their door and say, hey, I want to ask you out on a date. It's like, whoa.
Cold call.
Yeah, that's like, that's cool to do.
No, but the boys do that.
I did that one time of knocking on the girl's door, and I had a bag of flour because I knew she liked to bake. And I drew some flowers on it. And so I knocked on her door, and I said, Michelle, I would love to ask you out on, I've come here to call on you for a date. Because she was this Southern girl. And so I thought that she would appreciate a little, humor.
Southern humor.
Yeah. And so she looks at me, and her roommate opens the door, and he goes, is that Zack Oates in the door? And I was like, hey. And she goes, Michelle, you are not going out with him.
Whoa.
She actually used some more foul language.
Whoa.
Wow.
And it was like the most awkward thing of my life. And I never did that again.
Yeah.
Well, coincidentally, we've got here in the next room. Come on in. Michelle, come on in. So again, your book, you can find this book on Amazon, which is the best way to get books. It'll be here by Thursday if you order it today. And dating never works until it does. But in addition to this, you also have your own podcast.
I do. So I have a restaurant podcast, and it's called Give an Ovation, where we interview restaurant experts and we talk about, ironically, dinner. And we talk about different tips and tricks for restaurants. And so anyway, it's a great podcast, a lot of fun, and love doing it.
And again, the name is?
Give an Ovation.
Okay, so after you finish listening to this podcast, go find Give an Ovation.
Yep.
And listen to that podcast and
go to dinner.
And go to dinner.
Yeah, there are lots of restaurants.
With someone.
Yeah, there we go.
That.
Well, we really appreciate you coming out. This has been a blast.
Yes, it has.
Love being here. Obviously.
You're delightful. I'm going to go buy your book along with everyone else.
Talk for a half hour about myself. This is the perfect date.
Well, there you go.
Well, thank you for coming. Hey, I just want to remind everyone to follow us on Instagram. We're at It's Just Dinner YSA on Instagram. And also look for us. We're starting up TikTok.
Oh.
At It's Just Dinner. So I've got a bunch of students going to do some really fun things on TikTok.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been on TikTok before. Also, hey, if you have questions or you have ideas, you want to hear something on the podcast, or you just want to share an interesting experience, you can send us an email at itsjustdinnerysa@gmail.com. And be sure on this, when you're listening to this podcast, leave a review. don't be mean, but leave a review.
Just
Tell
say
us what you
nice
think.
things,
And
say
be
kind
sure-
things.
There we go.
The kindness
Yeah.
thing starts here.
There we
It
go.
We are
starts
fragile.
with reviews.
We are fragile.
Someone's going to read your review and then
right.
and then date you.
So, but you can also please hashtag us at hashtag It's Just Dinner or hashtag It's Just Dinner podcast. And be sure to pass along the word of this podcast. And so I really appreciate you guys being here. Lauren, again, thank you for being on the control booth. You were amazing.
Of course.
Hey, guys, and remember, just go have fun, will you?